What the hell just happened? I mean, I really wish I knew. Donald Trump's been nominated by Israel, the much coveted endorsement by Israel for the Nobel Peace Prize. Yes, I'm not making that up. Donald Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize for stopping a war that he started. Israel was pulverized by Iran, especially in the last few days of the 12-day war, according to President Donald Trump. 11,000 buildings were destroyed by Iranian ballistic missiles, and over 30,000 were damaged. The skies over Tel Aviv were effectively unguarded, undefended, especially in the last few days. The air defenses of Israel were degraded to the extent that they asked for the ceasefire. They asked for it through their good friend Qatar, which denounced the breach of their sovereignty by their neighbor Iran. Nothing screams sovereignty like a foreign military base on your soil launching bombing attacks on your neighbor against your will, or at least as against the will you publicly stated. It is a state of absolute confusion, and it's not over yet. It's not over that yet in Gaza, that is for sure. Israel lost 7 soldiers with 11 critically wounded just yesterday in the Gaza Strip. The cracks that are appearing in the Israeli polity are such that people are openly now asking, what on earth are we continuing to fight for in Gaza? And the slaughter continues at the food aid distribution sites. People, 25, 40, 50 every day, are gathering to be fed, much like the Jews in the death camps of the Holocaust gathered to be washed in a shower, only to find that they were being showered by Zyklon B gas, which murdered them. The Palestinians are gathering for a piece of bread, and the people who gathered them there are killing them with tank shells and with bombs. The state of affairs inside Israel is mirrored in New York City. Israel has been defeated twice in 2 days, once in the war with Iran and a second time in the Democratic primary election in New York City, where AIPAC, where the lobby, where Bloomberg, where every billionaire, trillionaire in America threw everything they could to stop the left-wing Muslim candidate Zohran Mamdani from winning the Democratic nomination, and were absolutely crushed. Mamdani is the Democratic Party candidate in November for mayor of New York City. How about that then? The Israelis could scarcely contain their grief, and they're not finished in New York either. They will try to group behind another candidate, maybe the incumbent mayor, whose disgrace was such that he didn't even run in the Democratic Party candidate, but is running again for mayor. Or maybe they'll go for Lander, the Republican candidate. One way or another, it's not over yet, but the victory of an avowedly hostile, pro-Palestinian as mayor of New York City, where there are more Jews than in any city in the world outside of Tel Aviv, means one of two things. It means that almost all of the non-Jewish people in New York City voted for Mamdani, or much more likely, it means that from amongst the Jewish community themselves, Israel fatigue has well and truly sunk in. And these were its first fruits at the ballot box. And the same will be true in the midterms. Anybody who wants to run in the midterm elections on the line of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris towards the Israel-Palestine conflict is doomed to defeat. And that goes for Republicans as much as it goes for Democrats. But back to the war itself. The sanest voice that I have heard is the one that we've got coming up as our first guest this evening. Professor Said Mohammad Marandi, as always, telling the truth, seeking to enlighten and not to propagandize. He said, I'm not saying Iran won a decisive victory over America and Israel. I'm not saying that it was a clear-cut victory, but Iran had the upper hand at the end. And no one, if they're being truthful, can seriously doubt that. In the last few hours, before the ceasefire took effect, a two-tier ceasefire where Iran had to stop firing before Israel stopped firing, a whole lot of damage was done. Many people were killed. A whole lot of buildings were destroyed in the capital of Tehran in a last frenzied effort to assassinate anybody of importance that they could possibly get their hands on. But it didn't mask the fundamental truth that strategically Israel has suffered an historic defeat, because nobody ever, not Nasser, not the 1973 war, not anybody, anywhere, anytime, has ever struck inside the 1948 borders of Israel with the precision and the power that Iran, night after night after night, pulverized Tel Aviv, Haifa, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and all these strategic centers. Beersheba, never forget Beersheba. The Iranian ballistic missiles were uncontested by the end. Despite that mutt, that punch bag, Piers Morgan, who was knocked around the ring by the lightweight lady, Candice last night. I mean, lightweight only physically, of course. She sent from God a voice of clarion, clarity, and truthfulness. She beat Piers Morgan up. He told me when I was last on his show that only one or two Iranian missiles had managed to get through the Israeli defenses. Well, those one or two certainly did a lot of damage. No, it's never happened before. All these Arab countries, all these Muslim countries, with all their armies, their navies, and their air forces, with all the missiles that they buy, all the bombs that they buy as protection money from the United States of America, none of them have ever landed one punch on Israel, no matter how many Palestinians it was slaughtering. But Iran landed hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles, some of them hypersonic ballistic missiles, which landed right on the nose of their target, in the end, uncontested. This changes forever the narrative so far as Israel is concerned. They are no longer the invincible superpower of the Middle East. Iran can now rival them at any point in time. Now, of course, Israel will rebuild. It will seek to, like a little Zelensky, sneak around the NATO powers looking for replacement munitions, replacement air defense systems. Of course they will. But Iran will be retooling and restocking also. And finally, China and Russia have arrived on the field in that regard. So by the time of the next round, Israel will have recovered some of its strength, but Iran, which finished stronger, will have recovered much of its also, and maybe then more some. What about the nuclear material? Well, of course, the nuclear question was a ruse to begin with. Iran is religiously, by fatwa, precluded from developing weapons of mass destruction. even though weapons of mass destruction supplied by us were used against them, including against Professor Marandi, who was twice attacked by gas supplied by Western countries during the Iraq-Iran war. So nobody, not any intelligence service anywhere, including, crucially, that of the United States, has ever claimed that Iran has built a nuclear war, against my advice, as you already know. So the issue of nuclear was always a device, a ruse, a deceit to manufacture consent in Western countries for the role that their governments wanted to play in the attack on Iran. It's always been about regime change. They've been trying to change the regime in Iran since it was founded. For 45 years, they have been trying to regime change in Tehran. But it has all failed. They've tried everything. They've tried sanctions that would make your eyes water, your eyes bleed. They've tried assassinations. They've tried terrorism. They've recruited gangs of Kurdish mercenaries, lunatic mercenaries in the MEK based in Albania, a bizarre cult led by a woman whose husband disappeared but has never been acknowledged to be dead. Maybe he's in a cupboard somewhere. They have recruited all kinds of people, Afghans, Indians, by the score, by the hundreds, to sabotage and to reconnaissance for acts of terrorism. And then finally, a few weeks ago, they openly declared war. In a sneak attack, Israel murdered scores of commanders in another shocking Iranian display of unpreparedness. How many of their leaders are going to be killed by Israeli terrorists and Israeli-backed terrorists? But Iran recovered. It showed the systemic depth of the Iranian government, that they were able to recover from that first shock blow when so many of their top people were murdered, and come back fighting to the extent that Donald Trump himself and Bannon, his vicar on earth, explicitly stated this ceasefire was for Israel. It was Israel that was taking a horrific battering by the end of the war. So there's nobody doubting, I think, who finished stronger. The only doubt is where the nuclear material is. Now, the IAEA, if the Iranians have any sense, will never again step foot in their country after Iranian procured documents proved that the IAEA was spying for Israel, spying on the plants themselves, spying on the enriched material and reporting it directly back to Israel, but crucially, spying on the scientists who were then later murdered. Their names, their pictures, their addresses were all given to the people who murdered them. So the IAEA is a busted flush. As predictably, we ought to have seen it from the start. When on the eve of the war, in the midnight hours, they delivered a report, a false report, that Iran had somehow gone off the reservation on the nuclear question, was evidence enough. But now that we know the role the IAEA have been playing, it's unlikely that any of them will ever set foot in an Iranian nuclear plant again. So we'll never know what happened to the enriched uranium, 600 kilograms of it. We'll never know if more is being enriched. We'll never know if Iran will follow the Israeli plan of strategic ambiguity, never telling anyone whether they have the bomb or not. Why not? It's worked for Israel. For 40 years, Israel has illegally held maybe hundreds of nuclear weapons without allowing a single inspection by anyone of their nuclear material. So if it's good enough for Israel, it's surely good enough for Iran. And this line was endorsed, quite importantly, by Mr. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, who poured scorn on the IAEA, and they're now bleating about the whereabouts of Iran's nuclear material. My last point is this. This isn't over. Netanyahu isn't over. In fact, he knows if he doesn't get back into the war game pretty damn quickly, he might be out of office, given the shattering blow that all of this has been to the Israeli political system. So I believe that Israel will continue its low-grade and maybe high-grade attacks against the Islamic Republic in Iran. And that can be withstood by the Iranian system. They could trade tit for tat sporadically in exchange for attacks one on the other. Question is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is now so uncontrollable that it would not surprise anyone if this very evening, having declared the nuclear question closed, having described Iran's nuclear capability as being obliterated, destroyed by the finest dam-buster raid since the Second World War, having praised and heaped praise on 20-year-old pilots who in the dead of the night conducted a military raid of such precision and power that we should all stand agog at their brilliance. It would not surprise me if Donald Trump this evening tweeted that he'd decided to go back like a dog returning to its own vomit. It would not surprise me at all if, stung by the criticism of the scum of CNN, of the failing New York Times, Trump was somehow persuaded to do it all over again. I'm sorry that I cannot bring you more positive or optimistic news, and it would please me greatly if I could hail a great Iranian victory, a great and strategic Israeli defeat, but I cannot. I can only say that in round one, Iran finished the stronger. It's all coming up tonight on the mother of all talk shows, Professor Marandi, up next. Stay tuned.